Welcome back. My name is Dr. Elvis Assom. I am a senior climatologist at Climalogic Inc., an adjunct professor in the Global Institute for Water Security, University of Saskatchewan, and an associate of the Climate Risk Institute. Today, we'll learn about climate models and good practice for the use of climate model outputs. This session is divided into three major parts. In part 1, we will discuss what are climate models. In part 2, we will highlight good practice for the usage of climate model projections. And in part 3, we will discuss some of the limitations of climate modeling. There is a connection between historical observations and climate model output. Typically, to produce application-ready data will require historical observations, which will be used for correcting climate model output during the historical period, and then using those correction factors to correct future climate projections through bias correction to derive application-ready data sets. How do we understand the climate system and come about producing climate projections? To do this, we use what are called climate models. These are numerical models used to understand the future evolution of the climate system as well as to understand the climate system itself. These climate models separate the Earth surface into three-dimensional grid cells. The results of these processes, the results of processes modeled in each cell are passed to neighboring cells to model the exchange of matter and energy over time. Grid cell size determines the resolution of the model. The smaller the grid cell, the higher the level of detail that the model will produce. More detailed models will typically have more grid cells, while low detailed models will have bigger grid cell sizes. So models with smaller grid cell sizes for the same location, the same space, will typically require higher computing power. So high resolution models require higher computing power for the same domain. Climate model resolution has been increasing over time since the very first IPCC, that is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change First Assessment Report. And over time, different Earth system processes have been represented in these models. So the evolution of climate models reflects the kind of processes, physical processes that these models represent. So in the 1800s, we were mostly looking at energy balance models, and in the 1990s and 2000s, we have atmosphere ocean general circulation models. And in the 2010s and that of those models which accompany the IPCC 2013 report, we look at Earth system models. So it is difficult to model the climate system, and with scientific advances and computing advances, a lot of progress has been made to improve our understanding and representation of Earth system processes in these climate models. Global climate models and numerical climate models, which are used to study climate change on a global scale. And as I said, the resolution has been increasing over time, but still this resolution is not good enough to really understand a changing climate at a local scale. So typically, to use these model outputs in climate risk assessments, we apply what is known as downscaling. So downscaling basically helps us to translate what the global climate model, the GCM, simulated at a very large scale and down to a very small scale. It could be a small region such as this, or a particular project site. Two main approaches are often adopted to do downscaling. We call that statistical downscaling, or we do dynamical downscaling using regional climate models to produce application-ready data at a local scale, such as a watershed or a point where infrastructure is to be assessed. Interestingly, all models are wrong, but bear with me, some are useful. And you can see, since the 1960s, climate modeling has been improving significantly, and with higher computing power, the number of models produced during each IPCC assessment have been increasing. And just in 2022, in February, when Working Group 2 of the IPCC publishes their report, we'll have greater insights on some of the impacts of climate change that we might expect in the future. And we look forward to looking at these impacts using a range of the models which have been produced by IPCC Working Group 1. And this report has been released and is available online. CMIP 6. So CMIP is the Coupled Model Intercomparison Project Phase 6. Introduces new scenarios called shared socio-economic pathways. And the IPCC Science Synthesis report based on this CMIP 6 is expected sometime next year.